Everyone, welcome to Macroeconomics. Today's session is regarding supply and demand, the applications of supply and demand, and how it affects also the equilibrium price in the market. We're going to cover certain economic scenarios that are going to explain how the supply and demand helps explain economic events that eventually shift the supply for goods and the demand for goods by the consumer. Let's get started with some applications in the economy. When we're looking at the supply and demand conditions, one of the highest demanded services are moving from one place to another. Consumers consistently move from one location to the next location, increasing the demand for transportation for the moving services such as U-Haul trucks. And demand for everything is relative. Consumers consume different goods in different manners, and the demand for products is considered to be relative. The demand for housing is relative, the demand for a location is relative, and the demand for goods and services really depends on the consumer preference. In 2016, people were moving to different locations in different numbers or in quite large numbers to, for example, Austin, Texas, Las Vegas, Tampa Bay, Nashville, Tennessee, and other parts of the United States, creating a high demand for U-Haul services. And the increase in demand for the product increased essentially the equilibrium market price to rent the U-Haul services for the relocation from one place to the next. So transportation is crucial when it comes to moving from one location to another, and also when demand increases or when supply shifts or it changes, the equilibrium price changes. So the demand for goods and services really determines essentially the equilibrium price in the market and consumers' consumption. We're going to apply the demand and supply for goods and services to different scenarios and see how this changes essentially the equilibrium price in the market. Let's take a look at subsidies and consumption, for example. One of the ways to increase consumption is by providing government subsidies, a formal assistance to the consumers to increase their consumption by providing them an income subsidy or some form of subsidy. This can be done in different ways. For example, providing an EBT card that allows consumers to spend more, and that's subsidized income. Subsidizing the consumers can increase their income to consume, it increases their consumption, and it also essentially increases the market price in the market. And this is done in different ways. Consumers buy more, the market adjusts, supplies greater quantities, the market demand increases, and essentially the market price may increase slightly above what it was before. Consider, for example, in different parts of the world, governments subsidize consumers differently. In this case, in the Kuala Lumpur, the government in that region has provided a fuel subsidy to allow consumers to purchase fuel for their day-to-day transportation. It has given them a fuel subsidy to increase the demand, to increase the consumption, but essentially what has happened, the price of that product has slightly increased above the equilibrium rate. Let's take a look at other scenarios where providing subsidies may increase the demand and increases the equilibrium price to a higher level. So we have in this case two panels, panel A and panel B, showing two equilibrium or two economic models in different stages. In panel A, we have the price in the vertical axis, the equilibrium quantity in the horizontal axis, the demand curve 1 without the subsidy, and without the subsidy, consumer demand in this case is indicated by the demand curve 1. At $10, the consumer buys 1 unit. If the government provides a $1 subsidy, government offers a $1 subsidy for each good the consumer buys, essentially providing a consumer an extra dollar. The consumers are going to increase the demand for that good or service. Here, with a subsidy, we have a new demand curve 2, D2. And this subsidy demand increases by $1, or an increase in demand has to do with the increase in $1 subsidy, which in this case is the demand curve D2, or demand curve at point B, is higher, and it has raised the price by $1 here. And the consumer, if that one consumer buys that 1 unit, is going to buy it now at 11. The higher price in this case is now reflected because there is a subsidy, a $1 subsidy. There's a shift in demand that has increased or shifted the demand for the good or service by exactly $1. Sometimes the price of the good increases by the full dollar, which it has in this case, and in other cases it increases slightly, a little bit more, but not so much, with a full dollar, because sometimes the government provides a subsidy and it increases the demand for the product, but the price stays somewhere in between. So here the demand in panel B, we have the demand curve shifting from V1 in equilibrium with the supply curve S1. At S1 we have equilibrium 1, $5, and we have the quantity in equilibrium. If we have a subsidy, we have a shift in demand curve, D2. With the subsidy, the demand curve shifts, and we have now an increase in demand because the consumer now has a little bit more income to consume, and that changes the equilibrium price from E1 to E2. With the subsidy, demand increases due to the fact that consumers now have a subsidy to consume, and the equilibrium market price has increased to $5.50, and the equilibrium quantity has also shifted or has also changed. Now, notice how in this case the price went up from $5 to $5.50. Instead of increasing by the full dollar, it increases to $5.50, 50 cents more. Even though the consumers have an additional dollar to spend, the equilibrium market price has increased to $5.50. So they have the other 50 cents or something else. This has to do with the supply being, in this case, upward sloping, but it depends on the slope of the supply and the slope of the demand curve by how much the equilibrium price changes. So sometimes it increases it by a full amount of the subsidy, and sometimes it increases it by a certain amount or half as much. Here we're using the case of the subsidy increase the price only by 50 cents more, but never, it still increases the price by in the market from the previous price. Another analysis where we can use the supply and demand model to illustrate economic activity in society is the college admissions and the demand for classes and courses in school. So suppose you have the traditional economics class or any class in your college, business, psychology, sociology, history, etc. And they're offered twice a day. You have the option to either take the 10 a.m. class or the 8 p.m. And both classes are with the same amount of seats, 30 or 40 seats in the class only, limited space. And there's hundreds of students enrolled in classes. And you only have two classes that are supplied, the 10 a.m. or the 8 p.m. So which one would you actually prefer? It depends on your schedule. It depends on who's probably teaching the course, the faculty. It depends on the perceptions of the students that have taken the faculty, etc. It really depends on two things. Your schedule, if it works on your schedule with your other time allocations for work, life, and so on, and personal matters, and if you want, it depends on your availability of faculty. And it also depends on the seats available. That's the third one, if you can actually get into the class. So most students might prefer the 10 a.m. class if they can get the class done early in the morning, if that's the best schedule for most students. Or if you work during the day, then you may prefer the 8 p.m. So if we choose the 10 a.m. class, we're going to have an increase in demand, a high demand for the 10 a.m. class, and a little bit lower demand for the 8 p.m. class. Everybody's going to go try to add the 10 a.m. class, and you're going to have a lot of students waiting. You remember when you show up to class and there's a lot of students waiting to add the class. That's the increase in demand. There's a lot of students wanting to take that class. So we have in MalSact or in any other classes, this may happen sometimes. When you have a lot of students wanting to take one course at a specific time, there's an increase in demand. Let's analyze the model for that particular scenario. So college and universities, for the most part, offer a tuition for all of the students that is standard, and they offer specific classes. So you have the supply curve for classes, which in this case we have one class, which is the supply curve in the vertical curve, the supply of economics courses, which we have one course at 10 a.m. and at 8 p.m. And you have pay your tuition 1, and they have the class, which is the specific number of seats. You have two options. You can either demand the 10 a.m. class on the red demand curve, the demand for 10 a.m. class, or demand the 8 p.m. class, which is the yellow curve, at a lower time. It will still be the same subject, but it really depends on your preferences. At the same tuition, both classes are offered at two different times. If students demand the 8 p.m. class, notice here how we have at the traditional tuition rate of T1, we have an equilibrium. In equilibrium, everything is equivalent to everything. We have tuition. Well, actually, tuition is the equilibrium tuition in the market, and you have the demand for the APM class, given the supply of the APM class and the number of seats, they're in equilibrium. At this tuition, you're willing to take the class and you have enough seats available that are supplied, and so on. But if everybody rushes to the 10 a.m. class and there's an increase in demand for that class, that specific course, you have a high shift in demand. The demand for the 10 a.m. class is greater. So now at this tuition, everybody's still paying the same tuition, so that's why you have a discrepancy now. You're going to have greater excess quantity demanded for the 10 a.m. class since everybody's rushing to that course. And this is when you have situations where you show up to a class and there's a lot of students that are waiting to add that class. At that point, then only the people that are in the wait list or that showed up first may get. We have a shortage situation. We have excess quantity demanded and we have limited supply of seats. The classroom only fits a certain amount of students, 30 people, for example. You have 30 seats available, 30 seats, and you have 40 people that want to take it. So you have a shortage of seats. Excess quantity demanded, you have 40 people that want to take it, for example, and there's only 30 supply seats at this tuition rate. So we have a shortage of the difference, 10 seats, the gap between the 10 a.m. class. That's the one with the shortage. There's not enough seats available. The one with the 8 p.m. class, everything's in equilibrium, just take that class instead when there's a shortage, if you can arrange that to be the case. Another scenario that applies is that often cases, college universities really differentiate who gets into the course by actually taking college SATs, consider the GPA, the ACT for the purpose of admission. And for the purpose of admission, this will determine who gets enrolled and who doesn't get enrolled. We have thousands of students that are often applying to college and only a limited capacity of admissions can actually be offered. So many colleges may have to decide who to enroll and who not to accept. And this happens yearly. So students may pay the full tuition if they're accepted, or they get financial assistance, which is financial aid, which is a combination of taxpayer dollars with grants and state grants and so on, or private donors. So it really depends on the student's qualifications, etc. So many students may pay part of their tuition, and the other part is paid through a combination of financial aid or private donations or scholarships. And the tuition that students may pay in a public university or public college and state school, or in this case we have different systems in California, the junior college system, 2 years, to the 2-year school, the 4-year university, and then we have the UC system. Tuitions are actually lower than what students may expect, the tuition that we pay, because the difference is often covered through the government, state government, or the federal government. So often it is, realistically speaking, the equilibrium tuition for college and universities is relatively cheaper for the students than the real tuition. Mount SAC, for example, is a great junior colleges in general, college, JC, the junior system. The tuition is very affordable, cost effective, and it's really reachable. But in reality, the cost to maintain the college is relatively multi-million-dollar budget. So the equilibrium tuition, what the students pay, is actually a lot less than the real cost. That's what we're getting to, regardless of what school and what college we're talking about. So college have to decide who to enroll and who not to enroll to be accredited as one of the best in the region. So they take the GPAs, ACT, and SATs as a rationing device to allocate who gets in and who doesn't get in, and so on. The economic model for this particular description is as follows. So we have the equilibrium model with a supply of students enrollment. This is the number of student openings at the college or university. And we have the students that are demanding enrollment into college yearly. So if the college or university, depending on who they are, charges a tuition T1, tuition is on the vertical axis, number of openings is on the horizontal axis. We have the demand for college and the supply of college admissions. The tuition that the college is going to offer is going to be T1. This is the college tuition, And at this tuition, what the college can actually offer as your tuition, suppose it's $1,000 a semester, $1,000 a semester, is relatively low. Most students are able to afford $1,000 tuition. Some may not be able to, but we have this particular hypothetical example. $1,000 tuition, the students want to enroll in college. The demand here, it's N1. The number of students attempting to enroll at this tuition rate, the demand, it's N1, which is greater than the supply of available openings in the college. So if we have 5,000 students or 10,000 students that are demanding college admissions, every year college and universities receive something like 10,000 applications, but they may not be able to take all of the 10,000 applications. So at this tuition or at this college, at this tuition rate, the demand for admissions is 10,000. Quantity demand is 10,000 students who want to go to the school. The supply available and the admissions and the openings that the university can only take, suppose is only 7,000. They only have a number of spaces of 7,000, but 10,000 students want to get in, 10,000 students. So you have a situation where there's a shortage. You have an excess quantity demanded of students wanting to go to this college at this tuition. So we have 3,000 students in need, or that are going to find themselves not getting accepted. However, if the tuition was the full market tuition in equilibrium, the real cost of tuition, the real market cost of tuition, then the shortage will stabilize, and at a higher tuition rate, the market will clear, and the supply of college admissions and openings will be equivalent to the number of students that will like to enroll. If the tuition is very affordable and very low, more students are looking to apply into the school, then the available spaces and the available actual numbers of the enrollment capacity is limited. This is the case of affordable college and affordable education, where you may have a lot of students that may want to go, but the acceptability rate and the number of spaces available is limited at that tuition rate, unless you increase the size and space. So this is sometimes a quite of a dilemma. Who gets to enroll and who doesn't? Now, the other way we can apply the supply and demand category condition is through medical care and medical services. And as we get an elder population, the baby boom generation is becoming older and in need of healthcare. There's going to be a high demand for healthcare services. So typically when you buy healthcare, you have traditionally several parties involved. Yourself, the medical facility, and the insurance company. And you can actually say your employer, because your employer may offer or may not offer you the health insurance. So you go through your employer to get the medical care, then it's the insurance, and then you go to the facility to get that care. So the existence of a third party separates the direct relationship that you may have with directly with the medical care. You may pay directly if you don't have medical insurance, but if you have medical insurance, then the insurance pays for your medical care. So this third party separates the direct party relationship. If you have medical insurance, a lot of people don't have medical insurance, and they have to pay directly to the provider, and even the provider may outsource the cost to their finance department to charge the actual person. They provide the service, now you pay our office, our finance office, and so on. So medical care is quite expensive, and it's in significant need, especially with today's situation and what's going on and what happened with COVID-19. A lot of people with or without care were in need of Medicare services, not just the elderly populations. Everybody needs Medicare in all stages of life. We just have a very significant population, which is the baby boom generation, that is beginning to retire and may experience high need of Medicare services or healthcare services, and so on. But with what really happened with today's 2020 COVID-19 situation is that it really tested everybody at all ages. Everybody it's in need of healthcare services, regardless of age. Now, there's various reasons why Medicare, Medicare, or just healthcare services is very expensive. Um, when we are in need of care, we demand the service, regardless of where it is. And if it's affordable, this is in this case, if it's free for everyone, there's a zero cost, then the quantity demanded will be demanded by everyone. The demand will be quite high if it's affordable, universal healthcare, price of zero. But there's really no zero cost of healthcare. Even if we had universal healthcare for the public, it has to be paid somehow. Taxpayers have to pay it. The government has to fund it by different means. So this $0 barrier is hypothetical, but the demand could be high if it's free for everyone or universal. So the demand could be quite high. And if you increase the price, then the demand adjusts. So if the quantity demanded is relatively high at the price of zero, then at some positive price, when you start increasing the price, you will expect the actual demand for certain things to start to adjust to given the price. And so on. So the demand for medical care will be lower. Some people did not go to the hospital even though they might have been potentially ill, potentially sick, or potentially infected because they were afraid that they were going to have expensive medical or expensive healthcare services. A lot of people chose not to go, or a lot of people choose not to go because they don't have insurance. So when you make it a positive rate that you have to pay, some people, the market adjusts. Some people may opt out, and some people may still go. Suppose we have the situation of X rates. In panel A, we have the demand for Medicare services. In panel B, we have the demand for X rates. And in panel C, we have the demand for X rates and the equilibrium price for X rates. Let's analyze panel A. In panel A, it indicates two different prices. At a price of zero, the quantity demanded for Medi-Cal services or healthcare services is 100. All of the 100 consumers demand healthcare at a price of zero, basically if it's free. If we increase the price to price 1 at higher price $10, then only 50 consumers want Medi-Cal. With high quantity demanded, when there's high demand of Medi-Cal and healthcare services, and with high quantity demanded, then the demand for X rates here is going to increase and shift. The demand increases and shifts to the right. It increases with high quantity demanded and with high demand of healthcare. This in turn affects the equilibrium market for X rates. X rates is one of the most important services that is offered in the medical field. You have the supply of X rates through the technology and X-ray rooms, and they have the demand for X rates. If it's at P1, during the equilibrium 1, price of 1, 50 consumers are demanding X rates. Notice how these curves are red. At a price of 1, we have 50 consumers. This curve, the demand for X rates, is red, so it's the same as this one. So we have the equilibrium price for those 50 consumers and price of 1 and those 50 consumers. If there's more consumers demanding X rates, the demand curve shifts, and those consumers are now going to shift the demand for X rates here on the supply and demand model, and it's going to push the price up. The price is going to increase. Higher demand increases the price for the good, given the higher need for X-rays or higher need for healthcare services. Things become more expensive if there's an influx of demand. It eventually increases. First, the price kind of stabilizes, sticky prices, and then they increase to P2, a higher price. So the lower the price for Medi-Cal, the higher the quantity demanded. If it's lower price, if it's free, then everybody wants to consume the product. The X rates demand is high. Low medical care prices increases quantity demanded for Medicare or Medi-Cal or healthcare services, and the demands for the product is relatively high. Everybody demands healthcare services. When you increase the price for Medicare, then you have low quantity demanded. Some people can afford it, some people cannot. Some people opt out, some people choose to it, and the demand for X-rays will be the same. So in this case, it's those four that are demanding it and may have insurance or may be able to cover it. So the price of Medi-Cal when it's relatively high, quantity demanded for the Medi-Cal is only met to those that need it or is lower, and the demand for x-rays are only for those that are needed, and rather than offering it free and someone just goes and takes the regular random x-rays just because it's free. So it's only specified to those that need it. Not to say that other people don't need it, but it's vice versa. Another application that we can apply this supply and demand to, it's sunny California or nice weather and the demand for products in different places. So some places in the country are considered to have good amenities, good locations to live, good weather, and others may not be as ideal. But is it really free to just move to a location and enjoy these amenities? No. The influx in demand pushes the price up. And one of those situations that the price is affected, it's residential housing, apartment rentals, leasing, and so on. So weather, for example, in Southern California may be better than the one in Maine or the one in Chicago because it gets really cold in the east, northeast, and so on. So if you want sunny California most of the time and you really need to live here because you have family relatives or your job is here or you just want to move from the cold weather, you can, but it may be a little bit more expensive because a lot of people are wanting to move to the area and so on. Some people may not like California, some people may love Maine and vice versa. So the demand for housing may be higher depending on where people are moving to or where the consumer demand is increasing. So the demand for housing may change in the consumer preference of that location. So the demand for housing may be higher in California if you have nice weather most of the year. We do have the fires, by the way. That's terrible. Bad air quality sometimes. But you have sunshine most of the year. So the demand is going to shift. And indirectly, we pay for the amenities. California is one of those places where you have potential snow at the winter time in different mountains. You have the beach. You have nice weather most of the year with some bad air quality. You have hiking places that you can go to. You have the pop culture, Hollywood areas, Disney, and so on. There's a lot of amenities, but those have with an indirect high paying price with it. Due to the high demand, things are a little more expensive in California, Southern California, than they would be probably somewhere else in a different part of the country. So let's take a look here. We have our supply and demand model illustrating the supply of housing and the demand for housing and the price of housing. Price on the vertical axis, quantity of housing in the horizontal axis. So we have the supply curve, which is the supply of housing in San Diego, Southern California. The supply of housing is limited, it's vertical, it's fixed here due to the availability of land, and housing takes time to build. So we have a limited supply of housing and our equilibrium price with the demand with decent weather, not so good in different places here in a different location. But since we're using San Diego, if the weather was not good, the demand will be low, and the price of the product will be reflective of consumer desirability and low prices. So this is a house in San Diego will be $100,000 with not so ideal location, not so ideal weather, a bad location, etc. The supply of housing is limited, so you have price of $100,000 with the demand of not enough good weather, bad location, etc. Low prices, price of one. With a really nice location, with a really nice weather, with a really nice amenities, the demand for the same location in San Diego increases and it shifts up with the good weather, if we're using weather as the only factor, and the price of it increases to $200,000. It doubled the price. So high demand for certain goods increases the price. Here we're increasing the equilibrium price from $100,000 of a particular house to a greater level with an increase in demand when more consumers, when more individuals are looking to demand that amenity in that house in San Diego at double the price. So given the good weather, given the good amenities, given the good location, given the Southern California vibe, etc., the demand increases and it pushes the price up. And you can actually find yourself sometimes in shortage of houses in some locations. Another application of supply and demand could be with the airline industry. The airline industry is also the one that are known to increase the price for their seats, the available seats in the plane. Aisle seats are a lot more popular and greater demand when you book a flight. You want to be in the aisle or in the window, and very few people really like the middle seat. that's just, unless you like to be in the middle, it's just kind of awkward sometimes. But the aisle seats are ideally the most preferred, or you like closer to the front, because you can get up at any time, use the restroom, especially in long flights, or the window seat, because you take a picture of the clouds, you take a picture of the wing, you lay down and sleep, and no one really bothers you, but you just have to get up and go through the other people. So aisle seats could be a little bit more popular. So you assume you have three seats in a row in a plane, each row on one side, so 3 on 3. Sometimes you have the big planes where you have 3 on one side, 3 on the other side, and 4 seats in the middle. It really depends on the structure of the plane, but here we have 3 seats on one row, 3 seats on the other side. And the supply of middle seats is equivalent to the supply of aisle seats, and so on. But the demand for the aisle seats is quite higher because of the consumer taste and consumer preferences. If the price were to equilibrate, we will expect a higher price for the aisle seats in general than for middle seats. And sometimes the airline industry allows you to select the seats of a plane. But if you go online or if you go on the app system nowadays, they have a price point. Some of them are free because it comes with your airline ticket, and they only give you select limited ones that you can choose. But if you select specific ones, they have different prices nowadays. So they have different prices now for every seat of the plane, with the middle seats always being the cheapest ones. This is considered price strategic discrimination. It's not discrimination like the one that we know of. It's just pricing strategy to optimize revenues and profits. So the airline industry, when you travel, can make some quite significant profits by changing the prices, given the consumer taste and consumer preferences and consumer demand of the travel preferences. So here it is. We have the model we can model everything with the supply and demand. We can apply this to different scenarios and show essentially what happens if the price changes. If demand changes, the price changes. So we have assumed that the supply of seats, it's vertical here, and that it's equivalent to the same amount of, the middle seats are equivalent to the same amount of aisle seats. You can either choose middle seats or aisle seats. Suppose all the window seats are taken. So because this demand situation is already established, the demand for middle seats, it's represented by the red curve, indicating the equilibrium price for the middle seats are lower, and the price for the middle seats are lower, closer to zero, very cheap. And the supply of them is the same, so you have low demand for middle seats, low prices, middle seats are less ideal, and the demand for aisle seats is a lot higher, demand for aisle seats, given that there's the same amount of supply. So most people want to take the demand seats, the seats that are in the aisle, and pay a higher price. If you run out of aisle seats, well, you need to settle with the middle seat and pay a lower price to compensate the fact that there are not many of them. So that's higher prices for the aisle seats, lower prices for the middle seats to equilibrate the travel and the airplane. The travel features and the airplane get still full, because consumers that don't get the aisle seats get the middle seat and they get it at a lower price. If you really have to price pay per seat, most of the time it's already included within your. Well, they charge you already in your ticket, and then when you check in, they assign you a random seat, and if you get an aisle seat, that's great. If you get a middle seat, then you already paid. But consumers pay a little bit different prices of their tickets depending on when they buy it. Okay, another application is the college admissions of athletes. Very interesting. College athletes often provide athletic performance, and also are students. And from time to time, you get the superstar athletes that are recruited by universities and colleges to be part of a sports team. And college athletes are offered scholarships, are offered certain amenities with the university, and may pay a different tuition depending on the scholarship and so on. So we have the two conditions where we have a super athlete that is recruited to one of the major universities, for example, USC, and after being recruited to a lot of different major UC campuses like in California, and receives a full scholarship. They have a super athlete that wants to play football and is had two options, UCLA, USC, or in this case Mount SAC, but decides to go to USC. to receive a full scholarship. All three colleges, Mount Sac has a very fine football program, USC has one of the finest in the nation, and UCLA as well, and they're rivals, right? So let's say that he assumes to choose USC, and where he receives a full scholarship, and so on. And we consider the tuition. This point is $30,000, and it's a two-step process. The college is going to give him $30,000 as a scholarship, and it's going to charge him the same amount of tuition. So there's two steps. You get accepted to USC. We'll give you a $30,000 scholarship, $30,000 scholarship, and you now need to pay $30,000 in tuition. Essentially, both of them balance off, but there's two steps. You get a scholarship for $30,000, but you need to pay your tuition of $30,000. So it's the same amount. There's two steps. So in this case, there's two questions that come about. Can the college pay him more than full tuition? And this is a lot of the big issues that come about in college athletics teams. Some people say no, if they cap full tuition, then that's it. Full tuition includes room and board, the classes, the meals, etc., and maybe money left over for books. But essentially, it might be more than tuition, right? Because there may be extra grants for books and supplies. So the big questions is, are athletes paid what they're worth? Because if they're only paid tuition, then they get, for something like a big college, they get marketing, they get the school sales, athletic gear, athletic events to fill the stadiums, etc. Major news broadcasts, agreements, and TV contracts, etc. So suppose they get $1 million in sales of the athletic performance gear for the fans, and also filling up the stadiums, and also getting some TV deals, and also some sponsorships, like $1 million. But they're only paying the athlete $30,000. Is he really getting paid what he's worth? This is a big question that's often asked. You can say that if you pay the full tuition, he's getting MP performs, and it's a student. Some people say that they should pay him more. You should probably give him a stipend, an athletic stipend, and get rid of that issue. This is your academic stipend, and solve it. We pay your tuition, and then you get an athletic stipend. But some people argue that no, they shouldn't get paid. A stipend, and it's not bad to be part of a team. Especially when some big schools do get multi-million dollars in terms of TV broadcasting, filling up the stadiums, and so on. But they get a lot of benefits as well. Okay, let's take a look at the model for athletic performance. So we have the demand for the athletic services, the supply of the athlete in this case. So this model exhibits the demand for and the supply of college athletes. So we have one athlete, like a football player, and this athlete in this case is demanded by the university to perform athletic performance. And if the market wage for the athlete in real time is actually $35,000, what they really need to pay, and they only offer him $30,000 in tuition. In this case, the college receives a benefit of contracting the athlete. So in this case, this area is going to be quite interesting. So if the market wage is illustrated in the vertical axis at $30,000, $35,000 and growing, and the market wage for the athlete is $35,000, then you have an equilibrium point where the university demands the athlete, and there's one athlete that is willing to go, and him or this athlete gets $35,000 to perform. The university will receive a consumer benefit equivalent to the area where it indicates this triangle, the area A, because they get higher benefits. The university, they're only paying $35,000, but in reality they're getting like $1 million in contracts. So the area, the university, in this case, the consumer receives a surplus equivalent to area A, which is the university. They get a higher benefit from acquiring the athlete. If the wage is held down at $30,000, And instead, then the university gets even a higher benefit of A and B. And in this case, then the college receives a consumer surplus, a consumer benefit. The university, if it only pays 30,000, they still gonna hire the athlete. Then the university gets even a higher benefit. And area B is the supplier's benefit from going to the school, getting 30,000 in tuition. So this is the student. The student gets 30,000, gets accepted into the school, and that's their benefit from going to school. All tuition paid, room and board. And for some student athletes, that's a great deal. But here we're arguing that the actual demander, which is the university, may get even a better deal, consumer benefit from obtaining this athlete, because it may become a superstar, it may become the athlete, the college athletic face, and a lot of gear is going to be sold. There's going to be athletic events that are going to fill up the stadiums, and trust me, they're expensive, like $40 to go to a game or something like that. Multiply that times 50,000 fans and viewership and so on. So you can say that having them pay full tuition, it's enough. And room and board, meals, preps, trainers, facilities, amenities, gear, etc. That's all within that 30,000. But the university gets a higher consumer benefit. Area A and B. The university. This triangle, if they pay 35,000, that's the consumer benefit for the university. Is this triangle plus this rectangle if they only pay 30,000. And sometimes they have walk-on students that they don't get full tuition, partial tuition, or none, but that become superstars. And they get the full benefit. So I would argue that you can offer a stipend. Maybe not pay them fully, but you can offer them a stipend. If you agree to a stipend of $15,000 above your tuition, that's for you because you were part of the game, you were part of the face of the campus, etc. It's not bad. You're a student, you're getting a transition, you may become a professional. When you become a professional, you claim your rights. But a stipend may not be bad. I think nowadays college and universities are arguing to pay them some viewership rights. Stipend will be sufficient, like a stipend per semester, like $5,000, $10,000 extra per semester. There are multi-million-dollar contracts. Okay, another scenario: how to obtain loans, opt out of loans, etc. within the housing industry. To make it easier for people to buy houses, often cases the federal government has changed the standards and the requirements for lending practices by either making it more accessible, lowering the down payment, or lowering the requirements and the FICO scores. So lenders traditionally used to offer 20% requirement loans. That was the safest way to acquire a loan. But now government has passed laws where the lenders of loans can require 15%, 10%, some cases 5%, in even better cases 3%, to make it easier for people to obtain loans even though it's not necessary. A lot of people benefit from low down payments but have a higher premium, insurance on that premium, and insurance on the mortgage, etc. to facilitate lending and facilitate mortgages. So lower down payments typically may have lower interest rates. Sometimes you may have teaser rates where your interest rate increases. It's low at the beginning and then increases after a certain point, and it makes it easier for families to obtain loans, and that increases the demand for housing. And with a higher demand for housing, a higher consumer clientele, the real estate agents are loving it because they have certain benefits from selling the houses, and that leads to a higher demand for houses and a higher price of homes. Higher the price of homes increases real estate value, and it may be counterproductive. It may be good, but I would prefer always stable prices, especially like in houses. Houses are becoming very expensive. In some cases, it's almost twice as expensive than before. The stability in housing prices will be good, but with high demand, it's going to push the price up, especially in places like California. So supply and demand could change. Now, as we conclude the conditions of transportation, sometimes we use the freeway a lot in California, and it's considered free space where you can go from place to place at different times of the day, and it's free if it's toll free. Nowadays there are certain tolls like the fast track lane, or if you go to a different county you have to pay a toll, and the demand fluctuates. Sometimes it's very congested in the morning hours, less congested in the middle hours of the day, and a lot of congestion in the afternoon when everybody's trying to go home. The demand and supply for the demand for freeway usage fluctuates during the day, but the supply is fixed. It's limited because there's only certain space and certain freeways available. So the demand will be higher typically between 6 a.m. to like 8, 9 a.m. Then it will be like at 10 o'clock or 11 p.m. at night. Everybody's just flying 80, 90 miles per hour. It's like slow down a little bit, people, just get home on time. So the demand generates quite some form of need for transport control. There's a lot of congestions. There's a lot of shortage of lanes. We should make freeways wider, maintain them, and so on. And to solve certain issues like that, we have the introduction of the fast track lane, which is some form of a toll, expanding the freeways, encouraging people to carpool, providing free gas emissions, stickers to cars that they can use for multiple riders. So we have the cases of the congestion in the freeways. The supply is fixed here. We have the supply of freeway lanes and the supply actual freeways. We have the 10. In California, we have the 10, the 110, the 405, the PCH highway. Then if you go to Riverside area, the 15, the 60 freeway, and so on, the 210. So the supply is fixed. And the demand for the freeway, it's low. It's really low during nighttime hours. And you might pay no fee to ride the toll at that time. Then if you were to ride it at 8 a.m. when the demand is high and the toll is expensive, here's 70 cents, but it could be more expensive during that time than it will be in the nighttime. So at 8 a.m. in this case, in a price of 0, then you may have the full congestions. It's a gridlock. So if there's no toll, everybody's using the freeway. There's high demand. There's a gridlock. This shortage technically is a gridlock. If there was a shortage, you wouldn't have a lane. There's just a gridlock. There's a lot of cars in the freeway at that time, and you're going wheel to wheel. Simply, you need like 10 more lanes to make everybody go faster. That's a gridlock. And then if you charge the toll, then it stabilizes, and people will wake up at 6 a.m., 5 a.m. to avoid this toll. But at 11 p.m., the demand is low. And there's always an equilibrium point with low demand at different hours of the day. Now, we're going to conclude the session with the supply and demand applications.